Sumi will hopefully be able to tell me that it's worked. Welcome everybody, by the way. Sumi, are we live?
Yes, we are live, yeah.
Wonderful. Welcome everyone to the first ever live streamed hustings for BMA Chair of Council. I'm Emma Runswick, a junior doctor in the Northwest and a member of BMA Council, which is the National Executive Committee of the BMA. I'm chairing today's event on behalf of the Broad Left and DoctorsVote. The Broad Left are a group of active BMA reps on the left of politics who engage in rank and file organisation while promoting transparency and democracy in our union. And DoctorsVote are a new initiative organising to win pay restoration for doctors. Between the two groups, we have 26 seats on the next BMA UK Council, which one of these candidates will be chair of. The Chair of BMA Council is the most powerful role in the organisation. The term is initially for 3 years, but could be extended up to 5. And the person in the role has the power to facilitate or obstruct the pay restoration campaign, amongst many other of our aims. The Broad Left and DoctorsVote have arranged a live streamed hustings because we want to see how candidates will engage with the grassroots. We'll start with some of our own questions, but we also want to ask your questions. You can do so on the Reddit post, on the Reddit live chat, or on Twitter using the hashtag BMA Chair. If you get them in before 4 o'clock, we might choose your question. We'll give each candidate time to answer, during which time we expect other candidates and the council members who are present on the Zoom call to allow them to speak. I will keep times and I will move them on if needed. At the end, we will want you to tell us who you think the best candidate is and why. This isn't the only hustings. The BMA runs an official hustings too, which isn't public. And we also have the annual representative meeting coming up, at which our candidates will all have the chance to speak on motions. All the DoctorsVote and Broad Left Council reps will publish who they are voting for and why following the BMA hustings and the ARM. We're now going to hear the candidates' initial pitch for 5 minutes each in alphabetical order by surname. So Phil Banfield, would you be able to kick us off, please? Thank you.
Yeah, there's always a disadvantage having a name beginning with B then, isn't there? But just for the first 5 minutes, I thought I'd just say who I am and what I am and what I do. I'm an obstetrician in North Wales. I'm a working obstetrician, so I still do nights, still do the odd SHO night, still do the odd registrar night when needed, and I will continue to do so. I'm the first person in my family to go to university. I went to a comprehensive school. I trained in London, and between Norwich and Cambridge, I'm an honorary prof in the School of Medicine at Cardiff. So I've got a long track record of helping with teaching, training, and assessment. And indeed, I was fortunate enough to be Clinical Teacher of the Year for Wales in 2012. So I kind of have a working knowledge of both medical students and junior doctors. Now, one of the things that I've always done is stand up against injustice, and it's always led me into trouble, whether that's as a junior doctor getting food available out of hours. My mother still has a press cutting of me setting fire to a prime minister on bonfire night many moons ago. So I've always been someone who has stood up. I didn't really have anything to do with the BMA until I was on call one day and heard there was a divisional meeting downstairs. So I went to get some sandwiches and came away as chair. And then it kind of got serious with reorganising services in North Wales, and it needed someone to take on the health board and the politics of that, and I was that person. So we had a lot of local organising, a lot of cross branch of practice, cross primary care, secondary care with the politicians. I got used to at that point where I discovered that half the time I'm talking to people who are lying to me. if their lips are moving, then they must be not telling the truth. And working our way through that, we mobilised both the BMA in Wales and BMA UK for a judicial review, and that judicial review was successful. And kind of the BMA then has taken that forwards in representing other situations now. And what I realised was the power of coordinated action. The chair of Welsh Council stood down after a year, and I was asked to stand for that. And it then meant I could bring all the things that we were talking about in terms of inclusiveness and in terms of involving everyone. So I brought my educational role into chairing a committee because I hadn't really got any guidance, but I knew that I needed to involve everyone. And I'm not an expert at everything, but there are lots of experts around me, and there's lots of talent around, and I've just used that, and that's been very successful and has delivered a lot for our members in Wales. And I really want the opportunity to bring the success of what we brought in Wales to the UK scene. So I'll stop there for now.
Brilliant. You haven't used your time, but thank you. Tom, Dolphin, could you give us your initial pitch next?
Thanks, Emma. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Dolphin. My background is that I grew up in Essex, where I was state educated. I was inspired to enter medicine by my dad, who was a paramedic. Eventually, I became an anaesthetist in London, working solely in the NHS, but I first got involved with the BMA as a house officer, and I've been in and out ever since. I wanted to start this by just saying thank you to Emma and to the DoctorsVote team for setting up this hustings. It's a lot of work from you to do this, and it should be, I'm hoping, very informative. I've been working my way through the list of new council members to write to you all individually. So some of you would have already heard some of this from me and some of you won't. And of course, we've got lots of other members watching today too. So why are we here today? Our profession, we had a social contract with the rest of society where, we would work all the long hours, we would sit the endless exams, we would take the personal and professional risks, and in return, we would expect to get clinical autonomy and decent pay and pensions and some protections and security. And that social contract has been broken. We need change. We need pay restoration, and we need pensions tax reform. But we also, at the same time, need to deal with the GMC and the dysfunctional CQC and the DDRB, the Doctors and Dentists Review Body, that's lost its way, as well as the workforce crisis that's making all our jobs just so miserably overworked. Student loans are crippling people financially on graduation. And then when they graduate, they're coming to an NHS that's broken, and it remains an inequitable place to work, as the BMA's report this week on racism has highlighted. The BMA has got to be at the forefront of tackling all these things. I want to see the GMC and the CQC fundamentally reformed, not tinkered with, because all the tinkering that people have done so far, it hasn't protected doctors and it hasn't protected their livelihoods. The CQC burdens GPs and hospitals with visits that achieve very little. And more insidiously, the GMC individually is reaching into our lives, and we keep seeing unjust decisions being made. And doctors are dying because of how the GMC goes about its business. And that has got to change. On workforce, I want the people who should be doing the workforce planning to, actually do their jobs so that we can have properly staffed doctor rotas instead of relying on exhausted locums and under-supported physicians associates to fill the gaps. And to that end, the Doctors and Dentists Review Body that's supposed to review our pay, it needs completely rebooting so that it can ensure pay is set at a level that attracts people and keeps doctors in the NHS. When it comes to inequity at work, the BMA's recommendations on racism in this week's report need to be implemented in full. There are many reports out there on the gender pay gap, and they still haven't achieved pay parity. And there still should be far better support for medical students on their long courses to reduce that financial burden on graduation. As Chair of Council, I would use the power of the office to get the people in the room who should be dealing with all these things and push for the change we need to see. I'm unafraid of speaking truth to power, and I stick to my principles. In the NHS right now, we're at a point where people are broken. They're burning out, they're leaving, and the governments in all four nations are doing basically nothing substantive to protect us or the NHS from this. And if it needs industrial action to make that change happen, I'm not scared of that. I've been a backbencher for a couple of years within the BMA, and it's time to step forward to be the change I want to see. I'm standing because I know I've got the qualities required to get you the change that you need. I've run a students' union for 2 years. In the BMA, I've stood up for doctors and students countless times in the media and in meetings, big and small, and I've made a difference to doctors' lives. I've led junior doctors into strike action before. I had the resolve then to carry on when the majority of that previous council didn't, and I've got that resolve now. I've got the integrity, the attention to detail, the understanding and experience, and importantly, the motivation to guide the BMA and the profession through this period and out the other side. Because if you vote for me, I'm going to give it 100% and be honest and open. I've got a vision of what things could be like. Doctors who are happy in their workplaces, well paid, professionally secure, able to do the right thing for their patients, and then go home at the end of the working day to a balanced life. Students with a great learning experience who are properly supported and who are enthused about joining the profession, and a profession that is respected and properly rewarded with that broken social contract restored. We need change in our professional lives for our sake and for the sake of our patients, because we can't carry on like this. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I'll take Vishal Sharma next.
Thanks, Emma. So my name is Vishal Sharma. I'm the chair of the UK Consultants Committee and also chair of the BMA's Pensions Committee. And I'm also elected member of the BMA Board of Directors and one of your candidates today. So thanks again for giving the opportunity to speak to you. So as Emma said, the chair of council is a really important role within the BMA, and it's essential that whoever is chair, they ensure that the BMA represents the views of our members. And by members, I don't just mean the committees, I mean the actual grassroots members on the ground who are working under incredibly difficult conditions. And I would go as far as saying the conditions we are under at the moment are the worst that I've ever known. So what's really important to me is actually what you think. And regardless of whether I'm successful or not, my door is always open to hear from members about how we can make the BMA better and achieve things that you want us to achieve. But you'll of course want to know about any chair of council and what they represent and how they will actually represent you. So I'll talk about my least favourite subject for a short period, which is me. So I became involved in the BMA back in 2008, and that was when I was first elected to the BMA Council and to JDC, the Junior Doctors Committee. I joined then because I was angry. I was actually furious because I'd seen thousands of people, incredible junior doctors, friends and colleagues, have both their professional and their personal lives destroyed by changes to the training programme and the disastrous medical training application service. Although I was impacted to a less degree than some, I still had lost 5 years of my life to that change and had really difficult times because of it. And I really felt let down by the BMA because it was fair to say the BMA did not cover itself in glory then. Things have definitely got better for a period, but once again, we're in a position where the BMA needs to sort of do things differently. It needs to change. And that is why I put myself forward for this role today. But words mean very little. I think what is needed is action, and I do believe that any chair of council needs to have a really strong track record of actually delivering things for its members. And by that I don't mean sitting on committees or having chats with government or having prominent media roles, but delivering actual benefits. And you consistently tell us what matters to you is pay, pension, working conditions, and that's always been my focus since the day I joined the BMA. So what have I actually delivered in that time? Well, as an appointed negotiator and subsequently chair of the consultants negotiation team, I identified grounds and led on a legal challenge against the government that not only prevented the imposition of a consultant contract, a contract that would have seen a starting salary for new consultants fall to £65,000 and the top of the pay scale being reduced to £90,000, but also contractually secured £400 million of funding per year for consultants. As chair of pensions, I led the BMA's campaign against the tapered annual allowance, and this ultimately led to the raising of pension taxation thresholds by £90,000. It's almost unheard of for a union to directly bring about taxation change, and whilst it hasn't completely fixed the problem at all, it was a massive win for our members. Now, I appreciate many of you here are junior doctors, and you might think, well, this doesn't really help you. And I probably would have thought the same as a junior doctor, to be honest. But actually, what's important to know is that pension tax and pension changes have a far bigger impact the further you are away from retirement. And one way of demonstrating that is I'm leading on another judicial review right now, and this is against the government's refusal to actually change the pension scheme, which it was bound to do in 2016 when it was found to be in surplus, by making the scheme less expensive and actually more generous. And it would have also have ended the kind of really unfair situation of people who are working part-time, who we know predominantly are women, paying more for their pension. We have managed to secure that change, that last change separately, but if we are successful in this legal case, that will actually benefit junior doctors to the tune of £100,000 or more, and for senior doctors around about a third of that. At the very start of COVID, I led on ensuring that there was protection for family members who lost loved ones during the pandemic. And this was a particular issue for junior doctors, medical students and international medical graduates, because they often had less membership of the NHS pension scheme. That ultimately led to the COVID life assurance scheme that provided financial support to families who lost their loved ones during COVID. I could certainly go on for longer, but as I set out earlier, I really want to engage with members, listen to what it is that you want your BMA to do. And by voting for me, you are absolutely voting for change. You are voting for the BMA to do things differently. My pledge is to do everything I can to make the BMA better, making it more visible, making it more transparent, making sure that it works better with you, the members, to make sure it's more effective in achieving what you want it to achieve. Thank you.
Thanks, Vishal. David Wrigley.
Thanks, Emma, and hello, everyone. Good to see you all. Thanks for inviting me along. Can I first say what a great honour it is to have the opportunity to stand as Chair of Council, the leader of our profession. It's something I'm really excited about if I'm given the opportunity, and I believe we can all achieve incredible things by working together. Just a little bit about me for those that don't know me. I was born and brought up in Blackpool. I worked for 5 years, actually. I left school at 16, comprehensive education. And I wanted to change direction at the age of 21, and I got a place at Sheffield Medical School after a few years of higher education. I did some junior doctor training in Scotland, then I settled in Lancaster and undertook my GP training there. And I've been a GP partner in a rural practice on the border of Lancashire and Cumbria for over 20 years now. I've always seen myself as a trade unionist. When I started work at 16, I joined a union immediately. I engaged with reps in the workplace and undertook campaigns, and I've never not been a member of a trade union. In the BMA, I've been an elected member for, as I say, for 20 years on the GP Trainees Committee, on the GP Committee itself, and on council. And I believe in progressive politics, looking out for everyone in society, no matter what your background is, giving those who are struggling a helping hand. And I'm a passionate believer in the founding principles of the NHS, and I've campaigned on that relentlessly over many, many years under all types of government who've tried to attack the principles of the NHS. And I want doctors to feel the BMA is there for them. I want them to feel it is their BMA, and all those from diversity strands across the board to feel that way. And it's not about one individual or the chief officers. I want a mass membership movement, and I believe we as a trade union and as a council can make that happen. So just to talk a little bit about achievements in the BMA, as a backbencher, it can be tricky to have that, but I think the conferences make a huge difference. Our branch of practices, junior members forum, annual representative meeting. I've undertaken work on a number of areas. We had a safe staffing project, which I started pre-COVID, and that laid the foundation for a coalition now of over 100 bodies ready to tackle government about a safe staffing and workforce project that we need, a political accountability in the NHS. During COVID, I worked and started a COVID tracker survey, which engaged with all members. We had over 15,000 replies in 48 hours to inform our policy and lobbying. And we used that on many, many areas around PPE, test and trace, mental health and wellbeing. I've undertaken dozens of TV, radio and media interviews, and also instigated a new programme on activism in the workplace, which you'll hear more about in council in the next meeting, where we're looking to roll out education and training in the workplace, make the BMA much more visible in the workplace, more relevant, and help our forthcoming campaigns and give autonomy to colleagues to push on issues that matter to them and their workplace colleagues. So if I was elected as Chair of Council, what do I want to see? Well, I think it's very important that we as a new council get to know each other. There's 68 people with different thoughts and priorities. We all have skills and knowledge we need to utilise. We need to develop a strategy very quickly and how to make that happen and engage with colleagues across all diversity strands. It's obviously important we look at the really important issues at the moment around pay restoration, pension taxation, workload or workforce and lack of it. And I would immediately work on this and set up work streams to look at how to tackle them. I would use the workplace training and support programme I've just mentioned and immediately roll this out. Working with branches of practice who obviously have their own autonomy, and council oversees that, and we must respect that. And also getting out there and listening to members. You know, the BMA is really London-centric, and the vast majority of members have never visited BMA House. So I think it's important that we get out there more and listen and talk to members. Transparency of committees, including the board and council, is really important. We need to be more open about the agendas, inform and discuss with council what plans and actions it's got, and also the risks that there are for the BMA in the years ahead. We need to tackle those. I've talked in the past about live tweeting of council meetings, being more open about our agenda, engaging with others in meetings rather than being spoken to. So in a summary, we have massive problems to tackle around pay, pensions, workload, workforce, DDRB, GMC, culture in the BMA, inclusion of colleagues of all diversities. And I believe I am the right person to tackle this. I'm an inclusive leader. I listen, I learn, I act and take people with me. I'm not an autocratic leader. And I want to empower you as council members to work with me as chair to make the BMA a mass membership trade union movement. I'm approachable. I've got an open door policy. I'm able to make tough decisions. And I believe I've got good relationships with our fantastic staff. I think these are all the key attributes you need from the next chair of council. And if I'm given the opportunity, I very much look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody. We're going to move now to our questions. We sent in advance to all the candidates a series of questions about political alignment, industrial strategy, the kind of culture of BMA, a variety of other topics. And we've picked a couple of questions from those to really discuss in this section of the meeting. So first, I'm going to ask Preeti to ask a question.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Preeti George. I'm one of the newly elected council members in the West Midlands constituency. So my question is, what obstacles do you expect the BMA will face in winning full pay restoration, and what strategies should we use in order to overcome that?
Tom, are you able to take that first?
Sure, thank you. I think the obstacles can be divided into internal and external obstacles. If you look at inside the BMA, there are going to be some within the BMA, as you alluded to earlier, who are going to be opposed to industrial action and taking the strong measures that are going to be needed. I think there's going to be a degree of work that people like the DoctorsVote team and others who are in favour of this pay restoration agenda with the action required, they're going to have to take some responsibility for going to those members of council and other branches of practice and persuading them of the need to act and the need to be decisive in our actions on that, because there's a whole piece of work to be done around persuading people about not standing in the way of what the members need. Externally to the BMA, there's going to be some it's not resistance, it's more sort of exhaustion from the membership, because everyone is just broken at the moment. You've got to get the members to understand that if they want to see change, they're going to have to stand alongside the BMA in getting that. And that's going to involve a lot of one-to-one conversations from activists like yourselves and others within the BMA in a sort of structured way within the workplace, so that people who want to take that firm action will feel empowered to do so. When there's something difficult to be done, seeing somebody you know and trust doing it as well, or saying they, telling you how you can go about it, it really empowers people. It makes them feel, yeah, they're doing it, I can do that too. So I think, it's going to be largely about winning hearts and minds to see that this is necessary action to get to a better place that protects not just our pay, but also the NHS and therefore our patients.
Brilliant, thank you. Vish, can you take this question next?
Yeah, thanks very much. So I very much agree with what Tom said. So if we look at the kind of BMA, as chair of consultants in the past, I've been in a difficult position where consultants committee have wanted to do a certain type of action, and actually there have been kind of challenges or kind of difficulties getting that over the line within BMA Council or within the chief officers in the past, and actually that's not really appropriate. And I feel really strongly that that's quite an easy fix, because we have a structure within the BMA that the branches of practice have delegated authority, and actually I would be very keen to see a situation whereby if a branch of practice wants to take an action, that the chair of council itself and the officers are facilitators and not obstructors. I think that's really important. So I think the internal side of things is a bit easier to manage. So I think our major challenges will be those external ones that Tom mentioned. So he mentioned a few, I won't cover those just right now, but I think the other ones are the government we have to talk about them because obviously they don't value doctors. I think it's absolutely clear what's happened in the past, what's happened during the pandemic, that at the moment they're not really valuing doctors the way they should. And that is going to be a difficult challenge. They know we're unhappy. They know absolutely that we are kind of, being treated really poorly and that we want action on this. But actually, despite everything we've done so far, they've not actually moved. So that's going to be a big challenge. There's going to be a challenge with the public. So actually we are in a time of cost of living crisis, and of course doctors are generally compared to the rest of the population well paid, and we have to manage that narrative really well to make sure that we demonstrate why it's important that pay restoration is achieved, why we are worth it, why we are different in that we've had such bad pay erosion over a long period. And that's quite a difficult message to sell to people who are kind of struggling to buy food or do other things. And that's going to be a real challenge. And then I completely agree with Tom about members, and that's where I think the BMA has failed a little bit in the past, is we haven't educated members properly, we haven't organised them, we haven't made them angry enough to actually say why this is important. I can see, I think it might be running out of time.
I was like, this is your last sentence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. David, could you take this question next?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think there is work to be done around educating colleagues, educating the media, the public and government, and using facts for that. We need to explain the shocking situation that doctors find themselves in, the crippling amount of debt that they face. Over £100,000 of debt, which I never experienced, and those of my peers don't. And we need to get that across. This is why doctors are so angry. Problems in the workplace around the very poor offers. There's no hot food at night. There's no restroom and somewhere comfortable to stay. Very poor terms and conditions where the rota is totally inflexible. Even we've heard about people who've got a wedding planned and they can't get time off. These are the reasons why doctors are so angry, and I believe the public would be supportive of this. In the media, yeah, that is a challenge. I've had interviews where the interviewer will say, well, you doctors are all well paid anyway. And I always say to them, well, I think the public expect doctors to be well paid, but given the facts around the real terms pay cuts over the years, the attack on pensions, the terms and conditions and other aspects, and the workload of workforce, and then I think we can get that message across, build up a campaign, utilise those facts to ensure that we take it through, listen to our branches of practice, and then council enacts it and uses all our resources. The BMA is a mighty beast. We can take that forward and enact it and see change and make change happen. Thanks.
Finally, Phil, do you want to talk about obstacles and how to overcome them?
Well, the first obstacle is to make sure that we increase the membership. The more members we've got of the BMA, the more weight that's going to carry. If we've got a membership that's less than 50% of doctors, it's going to industrial action is not going to work. And we've got to make sure we've got the mandate. Can we carry the doctors with us? Because we have to get around that delegated authority. When that delegated authority works, we have to make sure it's not blocked by council. And I think you're hearing from all of us that we would not block industrial action. Obviously, it's better to avoid industrial action if we can. And we need a massive comms campaign to explain to the public as to what the state of the NHS is and why the doctors are so angry. The timing needs to be important here. We have a general election that's going to take place at the latest in May 2024. The time spent preparing for industrial action and mobilising the troops and the resources is important, because as we get closer to the general election, so our leverage increases as well. We have to accept that some doctors will not want to take industrial action. Just like in the Civil War, there were people who had guns and couldn't fire them and had 20 musket balls. We have to allow for that. The public, I'm not that worried about the public. The public need doctors. And what we're doing ultimately is to give them an NHS that will serve them in the future. If we don't do something, there won't be an NHS, there won't be doctors, and they need us.
Thanks, Phil. Interesting range of answers. I'm not going to ask any follow-up questions at the moment, but I think because we're ahead of time, we might have time at the end to come back to some of these themes. For now, I'm going to ask Vasily to ask our second question.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Basim, one of the elect council members from the Yorkshire constituency. The next question is, how will you increase membership density, and member organization?
Thanks, Vasily. Vishal, could you take this one first?
Yeah, absolutely. So this goes to the heart of what the BMA actually is. So we often hear members saying, what does the BMA do for me? What are the benefits of being a BMA member? And I think we need to address that. It needs to be obvious as to what benefits you get as being part of the BMA. We have to be more visible. We have to make sure that we are seen and we are actually achieving for our members. And if we're doing those sorts of things, then we will actually automatically increase our membership. It really should get to a point where it's a no-brainer that you'd be a BMA member, because you have to make sure the offering is right. And at the moment, I don't think we do that well enough. We're not clear about what it is that we do for members. We don't celebrate our achievements when we do have them well enough. And we clearly, as we've talked about, have not done enough around pay and other areas. So that's what we need to do, I think, make sure our member package is right. Obviously, in terms of with visibility, I think we might come to this later in some of the other questions. I think the BMA locally is really, really important. So for me, that's where the real challenges is at the local level. It's about how you support your members, in your trust, in your practice, wherever it is on the ground. And at the moment, the BMA doesn't do that well enough because we haven't got enough staff locally. We haven't got people organised enough locally. And the BMA, once it's visible, people see what it's doing, hopefully the rest will follow.
Thanks. David?
Yeah, thanks. So I said earlier on, I want the BMA to be a trade union with a mass membership, and I believe we can do that. We've got over 160,000 members, but there's many, many more we can bring on side. And I think this does link into what my plans were around workplace visibility, making the BMA more visible and relevant to colleagues. So that's talking to them about issues that matter to them day to day. And we can do that. And I think we've got a problem with divisions, I think, which are the sort of local member groups of all branches of practice. And I'm not sure that they are the right mechanism for us to engage with members. And we might need to look at using the workplace as a way of bringing people together. But we should also try and remember we are one profession. So it's important that we pull all branches of practice together. So there is work to be done there with divisions, many of which are redundant, and they are great opportunities to bring together colleagues. Regional councils are really important as well. I think they have got a lot more that they could offer. We need to look at how we engage across all diversities as well. But it comes down to being vocal, speaking truth to power, talking about issues that matter to colleagues, that I mentioned before: pay, pensions, workforce, workload, all these issues that affect you day to day as a doctor and mean you can't treat your patients as you wish to. And then there are wider issues around the NHS and how it's been more and more outsourced and privatised, and those are issues that do matter to a lot of members. So I do accept many feel that the BMA should look at doctors first before the NHS, but I think they are linked together. But there is a lot we can do, and there's a huge amount of opportunity out there. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Phil?
There's no question. What's missing from the BMA at the moment is a reputation as being a trade union, and we have to re-establish that. I wouldn't claim to have got all the answers, but I'm really quite convinced, having spoken to you, Emma, about work-based organising, because it would seem to have a potentially huge return for modest investment. And this is the problem that the BMA's got, is that we don't feel as if we're in the workplace. Now, before this, I thought perhaps it's to do with a work app, a BMA app. Why isn't the BMA in your pocket? Why do people not feel that the BMA is always with them? The divisional structure, fragmented, LNCs, variable, but we probably need a flexible approach to make sure that we are truly representative in the workplace. And we need some really good, high-profile, visible wins, sticking up for people against discrimination, bullying. Every single workplace, has discrimination, blame. It's rife, and I'd like to see the BMA take ownership of these situations, so that it's not just the individual who's raising the concerns, but the BMA.
Thanks, Phil. Tom, your thoughts?
Thank you. Like Phil, I think that we need to be more present in the workplace. The BMA is currently planning a pivot to organising the workplace along the lines that have been described, with training for reps on contracts and the law and the rights that workers have. I think we need to have better support for the reps locally in hospitals to make people feel the BMA is present. And, you know, that connection, that individual connection is really strong and useful. I think national leaders need to take part in that as well. In 2012, I went on this big tour of all the 4 nations to talk about pensions at loads of different seminars, and, you know, just kept answering question after question until people felt satisfied. And people, you know, reported back they felt a real connection with the BMA because you connect with people individually. And that should be happening locally. In hospitals, you've got these local negotiating committees, LNCs, that need strengthening. They're not properly supported by employers. They give some trade unions facilities time. The BMA people on the LNC often don't get that. They're doing it in their own time quite often. We can use the pay restoration campaign as a hook to bring members back in, but we need to retain them once they've come. We don't want them to just join, take strike action, then leave. They've got to feel like they've got something to remain for. So we need to make people aware of the wins that they get for being a part of the BMA. And lastly, I think the membership rates need to reflect people's circumstances. So we, you know, need a parental leave rate and a tiered rate according to income or that kind of thing, rather than just these very broad tiers that we have at the moment.
That's really interesting. We've had a range of different kinds of answers there. And a couple of things have come up that ordinary members or grassroots members might not know about, in fact. Particularly, we've mentioned some of the diversity streams. So in the BMA, we have an IMG group, we have the Forum for Race and Ethnic Equality, we have an LGBT, a new LGBT member network, and a disabled kind of a disability network that's called the DLN network, which covers long-term conditions and neurodiversity as well. A couple of you have mentioned some of those things. How do you think that those are working at the moment? I'm going to come around trying to mix up who answers first. David, you mentioned the diversity streams. Can I start with you? David, you're muted.
Apologies. Yeah, the free network, as you mentioned, is the Forum for Racial and Ethnic Equality. It's quite a new one that is reaching out across the country, and that is starting to do good work. And there is much more to be done there. The BMA just last week launched its racism in the NHS report, and that was quite a shocking set of statistics, you know, with 84% of respondents saying they'd experienced racist incidents, which is just incredible. And there's a whole amount of work being done on that. But there are, as you say, there's other diversity strands that we need to also recognise. And you know, we've got a women's network as well, which is engaging and supporting and listening to women and looking at how we can increase the membership on committees. And that might be something, you know, we come back to because there's more work to be done that, and we'll come back to today. The DLN network, Disability and Neurodiversity, is a new one. We've also got equality champions on our branches of practice now, and this is something that I would want to engage with and talk to them on each branch of practice, meet with them, listen to them and learn what's happening. How can we make the BMA more attractive, more inclusive, easier for people to engage with in different ways, you know, online or in hybrid meetings or face-to-face. So it's about you know, listening and learning and talking to those who are actively engaged in all this work at the moment, because you know, there's much more to be done. We're doing better, but there's much more that we can do. Thanks.
Phil?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's for us to say how these are working. It's for the people involved in these groups to tell us how they feel it's working, and for us to listen then as to what their ongoing needs are. I mean, I think that rather what BMA tends to do is it has an initiative, then after a set period of time has a review and a report about it. And I'd rather that we saw something much more dynamic and iterative, so that we can meet the needs and in an ongoing manner, so that it doesn't become a tick box of we've got this diverse group and that diverse group. You know, these people, you know, we are in this together. You know, the BMA is its members, however people identify. And it's really important that the BMA Council then supports everyone and all of these streams. It is one of those things that I think that making sure that the voices are heard of everyone is important, and we have to go and seek those.
Thanks, Phil. Tom?
Thank you. I mean, David's explained what the groups are doing. I think part of the question also has to be what would the chair of council do to support them? You know, I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm a white cis man, and I know I benefit in many ways from being male and from being white, and I try and be aware of that. I mean, that awareness led me to spot that the government's plans for pay for junior doctors in 2014 were going to widen the gender pay gap, and that was one of the reasons we walked out of the contract negotiations that year. So, you know, that consciousness is important for getting change. As chair of council, I think what I'd want to do, in addition to supporting those groups, and I think it's important for me as a white man to be invited to those groups. I can't just turn up to them. It's got to be something I'm invited, a space I'm invited into, because that is a space for those groups of people. But for the things that I have control over, I would want, for example, all agendas that I have control over as chair, I would want to have a standing item about progress on the Romney report recommendations. I am proposing that any vacancies that arise on council over the coming term should be filled by women until parity is achieved. I think we need a leadership training program targeted particularly at women and ethnic minority doctors so that they can feel like the roles that we are currently not seeing them in very much are attainable for them. And part of that, I think, also could involve shadowing of chief officers so that the roles aren't intimidating and the roles feel doable, and then people will stand for election and hopefully be elected and we'll see an improvement.
Thanks, Tom. For members who are not familiar with the inner workings of the BMA, the Romney report was the report into sexism and sexual harassment in the BMA and made a number of recommendations for changes, many of which are yet to occur. Vishal?
Thanks, Emma. So, you know, I think it's a really positive step that the BMA has kind of set up these groups, and I think we are trying to make progress. And I think it's a really good start, but I would echo the thoughts of others. There's more to be done. And I think what we need to do beyond this is actually sort of integrate these groups into the BMA, so actually change actually happens. So, for example, how do we integrate the work of the excellent work of these groups into the other committees? How do we integrate it into council? How do we integrate it into the grassroots? And that's something that the free forum, which you mentioned, the Forum for Race and Ethnic Equality, has already started to do. So it's already starting to try and integrate into the grassroots. And I think that's really important as well, so that two-way kind of exchange of information is coming through and actually influencing policy making and action in the BMA. And I think education is absolutely key as well. And I think everybody in leadership roles needs to take this on board. And, you know, it's something I've always tried to do throughout the BMA. So to give an example, you know, when I took over as chair of pensions, it was almost universally male. And we made real positive steps to actually change that. We now have a very diverse committee within pensions. It's actually been highlighted as one of the best practice examples in the BMA of how you bring about change in terms of improving diversity across committees. So I think it's really important that people in leadership positions do that. And clearly as chair of council, you need to make sure that, you know, that's happening at council level, but also throughout the BMA. And this important messaging and ensuring that actually the kind of work from these groups is coming through to policy making and policy action is all coming through. Thank you.
Thanks, Vishal. You've mentioned a couple of things. Lots of people have mentioned a couple of things about workplace-based organising and divisions and regional councils. So there's going to be some agreement and some disagreement amongst both us as a wide group of people in DoctorsVote and Broad Left and all of you as candidates. On that thought, I'm going to ask Becky Bates to come in and ask her question.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here. My question is about how you'll foster what we call good trouble, so positive conflict that drives change. Thank you.
Oh, I think I'm back round to Tom first.
Thank you. BMA obviously functions on a degree of consensus. Council actually votes on things surprisingly infrequently, and then normally it's done by consensus and people have a discussion, there's persuasion, and we come to a conclusion as a group. It's unusual to actually have to vote to decide things. I think we do run the risk sometimes of being subject to groupthink. So it's quite important, as you say, to have that challenge function within the BMA. And I think that comes at all levels. So the chair of council needs to not surround themselves with people who agree with them. They need to have people in their team, not just the chief officers, but staff members and others in the board, for example, who are going to be honest with them and give them honest feedback and say, that's not the right way to go about it. That's not, you need to change direction on that. And that honesty needs to be two ways so that people can have a proper conversation. I think I'm quite good at that. It's one of the things I can do is see other people's viewpoints. And when I see people conflicting in a meeting, it's often because they're talking past each other and they're not actually hearing what the other person is saying. And if you can intermediate there and explain each other's viewpoints better to each other, you actually get to a point where even if you don't necessarily agree, you can at least be understanding of the other person's position and accommodate them to some extent. That function in the BMA is critically important. I think within council, it used to be a lot more toxic, I think it's fair to say, and meetings occasionally ended with people leaving the room in tears, literally. It's got a lot better. That sort of behaviour still occasionally happens in some branches of practice at other levels, but at council it's much better. But we still need to be able to challenge each other, and as chair of council I would hope to foster that and have free and open discussions in the meetings, both big and small ones.
Thanks, Tom. Vish?
Thanks, Emma. So I think we need to start that difference of opinion is good. It's healthy. You actually want to have your views challenged, and you want to look at different opinions, and people should be free to express their opinions, and especially those of the opinions of those they represent. What's not healthy is not respecting people or not doing it in a kind of friendly or supportive way, or continually trying to undermine other people if decisions have already been taken. So that's the balance. And I think it's really important that whoever's chair of council, has that ability to do that. And again, I'd like to sort of, reference my time as a CC chair. That's something that I do. I've actually taken 360-degree feedback from committee members and staff, and actually one of the things that really came out of that is managing people's differences in a kind of free of conflict environment where people are supported and actually able to talk about things, but actually do so with respect. So I think it is certainly possible, and we do that on CC. And as chair of council, I would certainly hope to encourage an environment where people can debate things strongly but fairly, and actually once things are decided, move on. I think that's the key to it.
David, your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Becky, for that question. I think it's a really good description, good trouble. I feel it's around encouraging constructive debate. It's okay to disagree. We all have our different viewpoints, our different principles, but, we need to be professional with each other. We need to understand we come from different positions, different backgrounds, and, we do need to be kind to each other. Having different views is okay. I think some of this does come down to getting to know each other as well. I mean, the last council was a big council as well, around 70 people. I didn't feel, we didn't get off to a great start. We didn't really get to know each other very well, know what our backgrounds were, what our strengths were, what our weaknesses were, and what we wanted to get out of our time on council. And I think if you get to know people, you know what they're about, then the ability to have constructive debate is fostered far better. And the BMA has done more work on this. We've got some great training led by our corporate development team around active bystander training. I've been on that, and it's absolutely fantastic. Some of the best training I've been on. We've got committee mentoring. We're going to have a buddy. I'd like council to have a buddy system where we all link up and have someone we can talk to. We need to understand biases and where we're coming and what are the impact of micro behaviours. All this is there. The training is there. The knowledge is there. We just need to try and foster it and get it out there so we all understand where we're coming from and get to know where we want to head to, and then we can have this good trouble. We can have that constructive debate, and it's all about doing the right thing for our members, for the BMA, and for our patients. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Phil?
Well, I've never assumed that I always know the answer, let alone that I'm right. So I've always invited people to give different views and completely opposing views. And that's been my style chairing, cross branch of practice national committee, is to set off in one direction and invite people to say something completely different. And in fact, we had a very good example of that when there was a very unsavoury racist event that took place in Cardiff University, and the whole committee took one particular view until it came to a junior doctor who gave completely the opposite view and described the hurt and the emotion around why we didn't understand where this had arisen from. And it just changed the whole view of the committee. And we need to be able to do that. 68 people sitting in a council chamber with half a dozen people talking. The other 50 people are bored to tears. So I have to say, I'm going to try and do completely the opposite of what we do normally. And that's encourage list server discussion while we're in council, so that we can make sure that everyone has an opportunity to contribute. And as chair, we've got to make sure that everyone on council feels part of that team. You know, far too long there's been a top table and everyone else seems to turn up and doesn't really have anything active to contribute. And we have to change that. We need to find ways of making sure that discussions, debates, the arguments that lead to understanding take place in a variety of means, so that council can get down to the business of deciding policy, enabling, acting, and making the votes that count.
Thanks all. I'm going to ask Sumi to ask our next question. Or I might not. Okay.
Hello, hi. My name's Sumi. I'm one of the newly elected. I'm so sorry, there's a lot of noise at the moment.
This is the nature of our jobs. Are you in a place where you're able to talk, Sumi?
Hi, my name's Sumi and I'm a newly elected council member in London. Yes, it's a bit better now. Is it better?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So my question for the candidates is if everything went to plan, what would you want the BMA's list of achievements to be at the end of our 4-year term?
Okay, I messed up order before, so I'm going to ask Phil to come in first. Is that okay, Phil? Did you hear the question? Should I repeat it?
No, I've got a list of them, all right, but because it's quite a long list, I thought that I would refer to it rather than miss any of them out, because I'm very specific, right, about what I think we should have achieved. Our BMA membership must be more than 50%. It's got to be way up at the end of 4 years. We've got to be judged to be relevant to members, all right, and I think that relates to your workplace organising. We have to have tangible wins locally and nationally, and they have to be publicised so that people understand that the BMA means we're back in business as a trade union. We must have an English council. We've got to tackle, devolution happened a long time ago, and the devolved nations have been very effective in achieving things locally for their members and in their negotiations with their respective governments. The problem for England is, and for UK Council and the chair of UK Council, is that we spend a lot of time talking about the kind of things that England would want to talk about and resolve, and it just interferes and gets in the way sometimes of the decisions that BMA needs to make as a council. We must have women candidates on the next ballot for chair. Right, so the chair of council has to move and make the BMA a BMA that not only fosters someone wanting to be chair as a woman, but that enables the support to be there so that they are then able to succeed and not fail. And then there's all sorts of things I want to see about improving civility and stopping bullying in the workplace. We've got a big role at the moment. If you complain, you get labelled as an individual. And what I want to see is I want to see the BMA taking on those cases. So it's the BMA against the employer, not the individual.
I'm going to pause you there. It's maybe something that you could write about online if you run out of space today to talk about these. Tom, can I bring you in?
Sure, thank you. And thanks, Sumi, for that question. The BMA's got lots of projects on the go at the moment, and some of them are not as effective as they could be, partly because there's clashing, particularly around getting time with the comms team. So I think to get things done, we need to have an overall strategy for the BMA that includes a comms strategy, part of the same document to kind of plan the year with a set of goals that we can work backwards from to see for which steps we need to achieve them. Because at the moment we've got a mission statement, but we don't have a set of measurable goals. And I think those goals need to include some of the obvious things like pay restoration and pension tax reform need to have happened by the time period you're talking about. I want to see, as I said, GMC and CQC and Doctors and Dentists Review Body reform underway. I mean, that's going to take years to happen, but I want to see the Royal Commissions being put together, whatever it is the government thinks is the way to do it, but that needs to be actually happening. As Phil said, membership levels need to be on their way up and well over 50%, more like 70%. And I want to see a national medical and non-medical workforce plan for the NHS actually in place and performing well against its own internal targets so that we know that the profession is going to be better supported going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Vish?
Thanks. Like others, I've got a long list of things that I'd like to see, but actually, I think one of the mistakes we make in the BMA is we don't prioritise effectively. So actually, I'm going to give you four that I really, really want to see at the end of the term of Chair of Council. The first is definitely pay restoration. So juniors have done a really good job of sort of owning this narrative, but a lot of this actually came out of work done by the consultants committee that I led on a few years ago in terms of pay erosion. We did a big piece of work on this, and that's something I feel so strongly about, that actually that absolutely has to be in place, not just for juniors, but for actually all branches of practice, that we actually are paid appropriately. Of course, as chair of pensions, pension reform is absolutely vital. I think I've done huge amounts of work on that in the past. That is absolutely a key priority. And one thing I definitely want to get across to people is that is, if anything, more of a priority for the current juniors than it is actually for senior doctors. We have lots of accrued pension that is relatively safe. Your pensions are the ones that are even at greater risk. So absolutely about pension reform as well. Tom's touched on this, but absolutely the GMC reform is really critical. As chair of consultants, we've supported high-profile cases that people know about in the media, where the GMC have absolutely treated people appallingly, and the consultants committee and myself, we've sponsored those cases to make sure the BMA support those individuals. But we cannot allow the GMC to continue to behave on this one. And the final one is one that I would love to see, but actually we're not going to get it in 3 years, but we need to be well on the way. And that is a workforce that's properly valued, less burnt out, less stressed, and actually enjoying their jobs again, because that's the NHS we joined, and actually we need to get to that. But that requires more doctors, it requires more staff, it requires more beds. That will take a long time. We won't get that in 3 years, but we need to be well on the way to actually having a plan for it.
David?
Yeah, thanks, Sumi. I think one of my overarching principles would be that we are, at the end of 4 or 5 years, we have one profession that sees ourselves as one profession with the UK BMA that is effective as a trade union. I break down some of my hopes at the end of the 4 years into different areas. For council itself, I would hope that we have delivered on the strategy that we will bring about. We prioritise those strategies. We've delivered for branches of practice and supported them in the work that they bring to us as council, and we work as an effective committee. So we work together really well as a group, delivering on all our strengths. For diversity aspects across all strands that I mentioned, I want to really improve on where we are. We need to listen. We need to ensure that we encourage colleagues working with us, find out why we are in the place we are, and improve representation. We can do that. We can improve far more on where we are at the moment. For the BMA itself, I want us to have, as I've said before, a mass membership movement, so the voice of doctors is heard clearly across the UK. and I want us to have won on a number of issues. Some of those are then external ones around, as Vish said, DDRB and CQC, as Tom mentioned. We need radical reform there, or as BMA policy is to get rid of CQC. We need a radically reformed GMC. All the huge problems we've got there on the problem with doctors being attacked and issues that we find in the media. I want us to have won on pay restoration. Pension taxation is sorted, and as Vish mentioned, a workforce plan that means political accountability occurs, so we know what doctors we've got now and what we need in the future to deliver effective and safe care. And then finally, just on our staff, BMA staff, our biggest asset, I want them to enjoy working for the BMA. I want them to feel supported and encouraged, that they feel the BMA is a safe place to work. They can speak out and also just enjoy their day-to-day work with members. And then finally, the member, I want them to see the BMA as relevant to them. They're proud to be a member of the BMA. They're proud that the BMA is their trade union, and then encourage others to join. We can do that with the plans I've got for us as a trade union, and it's just, there's great times ahead, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thanks, David. I'm going to pass over to Joe briefly. Joe Sutton-Klein's going to talk to all the people watching about the pay campaign whilst we compile a section of the Reddit and tweeted questions. And over to you, Joe.
Hi, I can't share my screen, but hi, I'm Joe. I'm a council member-elect for Yorkshire. I did make a PowerPoint, but I don't think I can share it. So, but I'm going to talk very briefly about the pay campaign and why you should get involved. So I put on this PowerPoint from 2018 a Guardian article which said that UK worker strike total falls to the lowest level since 1893. And that's really about understanding the kind of context we're in, that we've had over a century of like the decimation of trade unions, which have got a lot worse since Thatcher in the 1980s. But actually over the past few months, like there's been loads of trade union wins around us. So just in the past month, 13th of June, Gatwick airport workers won 21% pay increase. 30th of May, Glasgow airport workers won a 28.5% increase. GMB won 24% pay rise for bin workers in Wilden, and hospital cleaners and porters at Croydon Hospital won a 24% pay rise on the 31st of March. And that's all basically to say that pay restoration, full pay restoration for doctors is absolutely possible. It won't be easy and it will be incredibly hard work, but it's completely possible. But we need your help. There's a few different ways to help. Seeing as we're talking about the chair elections now, I thought I'd start with the bureaucracy of the union. So DoctorsVote and Broad Left put together slates for the council elections, which is why we're here. And this summer we have the junior doctor committee elections. There's a few different junior doctor committees happening. So there's the UK JDC, there's the Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales JDCs, and there's also the regional JDC. So there's the Yorkshire JDC, South Thames JDC, etc. Being a JDC rep involves working hard in the campaign and leading that campaign within the union. And it also involves coordinating with other more local reps in your area. And as we get nearer towards industrial action, it will mean coordinating picket lines, making sure that people have the right resources, and being a kind of real place of communication between the grassroots and the bureaucracy. If you are at all interested in standing, then send DoctorsVote an email and join our organising platform. There are some elections coming up in 2 weeks at the annual representative meeting for just 8 places available there. But we have many more elections coming up later in the summer, and we're still looking for lots of people. Though we actually already have a great list. And then the sort of, I would say, probably more important part of the pay campaign is the grassroots organising, or in union speak we call it rank and file organising. And I put up a slide on the PowerPoint which you can't see, from the UCU action in 2018. So for people who don't know, UCU is a university and colleges union, And in 2018, they were taking industrial action about their pensions. It was going pretty well, but there were loads of workers out on strike across the country. But the bureaucracy of the union, so the chairs and the high up people in the committees, were having a lot of pressure put on them by the media and the government. And in the end, they came out and they had sort of accepted an offer, which was like a bit better than what they had before, but wasn't really what the members wanted. So the members got out on the streets. They stood outside the UCU office and had massive protests, and they all went out on strike the next day, even though the bureaucracy had told them, nah, you should accept this offer, it's the best we can get. And I think that's a real learning point for us about the role and the importance of grassroots junior doctors in giving the bureaucracy pressure from below to demand full pay restoration and not accept like 20% or 15%, but actually the full pay that we deserve. So this involves talking to your colleagues and persuading them through structured organising conversations, organising local groups. It will involve organising the picket lines in your hospital. That's pretty daunting, but DoctorsVote have created a sign-up form, so you can look on Reddit and find that. And we're going to send out some resources and some we're calling them structure tests, which is another technical term, but we'll explain all of that if you sign up, and I'd really urge everyone to do it. The BMA has also got a pay activist network set up, so you can sign up on their website. It hasn't been active yet, but I've been told that there's some good training coming, possibly delivered by Emma herself. And that training is going to be inspired by Jane McAlevey, who's an excellent trade unionist who has helped lots of unions win big.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jo, and apologies for our technical issues. We will circulate those slides afterwards and put the information on Twitter and Reddit and anywhere else we can fit it so that people can see that. We've had absolutely loads of really excellent questions. So I had planned a little exercise here for candidates, but I'm going to scrap it because I think that there are loads of excellent questions that we should ask you. The first one is a relatively simple yes or no question, but it's been upvoted so substantially that I think we should ask it explicitly, which is, do you support full pay restoration for junior doctors, i.e. a 30+% pay rise from current salaries? Can I take you back in alphabetical order by surname? So Phil, Tom, Vish, and then David.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Sorry, I wasn't sure if it was my turn. Yes, I would.
Vish?
Yes, but with a caveat that it has to be with DDRB reform, because otherwise what will happen is your pay will be eroded again. So there's no point giving you 30% this year and for it to be the same situation in 3 or 4 years' time, because this is what happened to consultants in 2003. We were given a large uplift and it was clawed back over time. So yes, but you need more. You need the DDRB restitution so it's fair.
David?
Yes, absolutely. And with protective factors as well, which would come in with any negotiation. Absolutely.
Okay. The next one has been asked several times over, but in slightly different ways. So it's about the GMC, which we've already talked about a little bit. As BMA Chair of Council, what steps would you take to ensure that the GMC treats doctors fairly, regardless of ethnicity, and ensure that doctors are not so vulnerable to disgruntled members of the public and other similar issues? Tom, can I take you first, then Vish, then David, then Phil?
Sure. So the GMC acknowledges that they have a problem with ethnic minority doctors and the way that they're treated, and they keep making these very sort of tinkering around the edges, minor changes, and it's not really achieving any improvement. And we've still got doctors, taking their own lives because of the way the GMC goes about its business. It's not working anymore, and the model that GMC is using, they've kind of changed it over time, and it seems to be getting worse rather than better. What I think is that the GMC itself needs to be the subject of major reform, possibly abolition and replacement with something else, but you need to see a wholesale reform whereby the GMC goes about its business very differently, and that's going to involve all the groups that have a say in regulation. So you've got, the public, you've got parliamentarians, royal colleges, the representatives of the profession, including the BMA, of course. They all need to be in the room having that discussion about what should regulation look like for individual doctors as we go forward, because the current model isn't working. And I think if we just keep fiddling with it, nothing's going to improve. That's going to take a little while. And in the interim, I think the GMC needs to fundamentally commit, the current GMC as it is now, needs to commit to focusing its attention and its punitive measures only on people who are accused of the most serious offences, because at the moment people are being picked up for all kinds of silly things. I know many complaints are removed at the early stages, but I think too many cases are getting through, which are just a waste of everyone's time and incredibly stressful for the doctor involved. Thank you.
Vish?
Sorry, trying to unmute. Yeah, so absolutely. So this actually goes beyond the GMC, actually, but absolutely we need GMC reform. I'll come to that in a second. We need to tackle local issues as well, because this all starts at the point of referral. And, speaking as an ethnic minority doctor myself, we see that actually the disproportionate rates of referral in the first place are a real problem. So that, that kind of institutional racism in the NHS still exists, unfortunately. That needs to be tackled. But once it goes through the GMC process, it's really shocking how it's dealt with. So I think the GMC have got this completely wrong. Their role should be to actually determine whether somebody has, committed an offence or not, and actually kind of take action accordingly. But that's not what they do. They almost seek to actually prosecute and find guilt. That's almost their motive. And if you speak to many of the QCs that actually work on behalf of the GMC, and that's the other thing to say, is that the GMC will always employ QCs in their kind of deliberations, and often the doctors are representing themselves. That's not a fair balance. But if you speak to the QCs, that they almost liken this to sort of trophy hunting. They want to get a conviction, and that's completely wrong for the GMC. They should be sort of working out whether somebody has committed an offence, not proving guilt, and that is going to require really kind of full-scale reform. And whether that can be done without actually scrapping it and starting again and actually can be reformed, that's hard to know, but it really does need widespread reform.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that we need absolutely fundamental changes to the GMC. It's not fair. It discriminates at the moment. We see doctors in panels, hearing panels, who either can't afford legal representation, or their medical defence organisation pulls the plug on them. They can do that. Many colleagues don't realise they can just walk away from you and not give you the representation, and then you're there on your own against the GMC in a quasi-judicial process with the GMC's barrister up against you. I mean, this is just absolutely incredibly unfair, and it's tilted in favour of the GMC, and we have to stop this. It's wrong. We know that doctors from ethnic minority backgrounds are twice as likely to be referred by their workplace employers than their white counterparts. That's from the GMC's own report in 2019, Fairness to Refer, which I'd recommend colleagues read. But there is something fundamentally wrong with the GMC. We all are in fear of getting that letter through the post. That we need fundamental reform. We have policy actually in the BMA to declare we have no confidence in the GMC. That was from 2018 actually. And we have to tackle that going forward. As Chair of Council, I would do that. Doctors out there crying out. We've seen a doctor recently given a sanction for just over the words they used around a laptop, and that was in the media a lot. And these are happening over and over again. So we've got to tackle this. We've got to stop it and see a massive change in the GMC. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Phil?
Well, the question is what the BMA's role is in this, and the pushback, and we've got to stand up publicly and behind closed doors to get the GMC to do what it's supposed to do, which is defend the public and not to discriminate against doctors who are often on the receiving end of some very spurious complaints. Now, that means the BMA revisiting perhaps what its offer to doctors is. No doctor should end up in front of the GMC standing on their own, right? And we have to ask what our role as a union might be. We might need to revisit our relationships with the defence unions. But the BMA standing up more in the workplace. We know that before we get to the GMC referral, a lot of pressure is put on doctors in the workplace. They're reported, they're discriminated about, they're victimised, and the GMC complaint is just on the end of something that's been going on for a long time. And I really want us to stand up and have a BMA that's doing more in that circumstance and tackling the point of entry to the GMC referral. Now, sorry, can I just add? Well, I support, but I think what the BMA is trying to do at the moment is to ensure that there's independent scrutiny. And the idea of having every referral anonymised so that it is looked at completely without any reference to gender, race, or circumstance, which hospital it is, then I think that would help us as well.
You did have more time. I just want to clarify what you mean by revisit our relationship with the defence organisations.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I've found several times is that we enter into a circular argument between who won't represent the member, and if we're ever getting to the situation where that's happening, then I would like the BMA to have a presumption that we would represent. And we've seen it with whistleblowing as well. There's an argument over who should or shouldn't be committed to the member. If the BMA it has the member, then we have a duty to them, I think, regardless.
Okay. The next question is about training. What will your approach be, or what would your approach be as council chair to the shortage of training places in the UK? And a kind of add-on question, what's your position on prioritising UK trained doctors for training posts? We'll start with David.
Yeah, thanks. So approach to shortage of training places. I think this is where the workforce plan needs to come in. There is no plan at the moment. We hear about doctors being trained. We hear Jeremy Hunt made promises about 5,000 more GPs by 2020, and we had 500 less. This is because there's no workforce plan in place, which gives political accountability. I led on the BMA response to the Health and Care Bill, where we pushed really hard for a workforce plan with a lot of support from peers and, as I said, over 100 other organisations. And the government just ignored it because they're running scared, because they know that the political accountability will cause them great problems. So there is a lot more work to be done there. And that coalition we've now got, that we've built up, we can use to see how we tackle these workforce shortages and absolutely increase the number of doctors. I'm a GP, so I see day to day the huge shortage of doctors. The BMA reckons about 50,000 doctors short. That leads to increased pressures, increased workload, doctors in tears at the end of the day, not able to cope or care for their patients as they would wish to do so. So, that is a focus, I think, because that's how to tackle it, is with accountability, with the facts and figures, and then we can work out how we ensure that we don't have a shortage going forwards. On the position, prioritising UK graduates, was it, or UK training places?
So UK doctors, UK trained doctors. So it would be UK graduates or people who are in the UK already, as opposed to people who are moving. So
I think it links in with the workforce plan that I mentioned earlier, and that could be part of it. But we're seeing increasing numbers of international medical graduates coming to the UK now, and the BMA has got a plan around supporting those colleagues. Many of them are on contracts, quite shocking contracts. They're exploiting them, and that's something that we need to tackle. But we do need to make the NHS a great place to work in. Make sure that doctors are looked after. As I said before, you've got good terms and conditions, pay that you feel rewarded by, and your workplace is somewhere nice to go to and rest and be looked after, because that makes all the difference. This is why doctors want to move to Canada or Australia, because they look after their staff. It's a basic thing you do as an employer. Look after your staff and they will look after you, and then we can ensure that doctors stay in the UK, stay in the NHS, and look after our patients. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Phil?
Training places in the UK, yes. Too much of the way our services run is being determined by, for want of an old phrase, deaneries. And we need to be much smarter about putting pressure on them to increase the number of training places. You know, we know there are shortages of consultants. We know that what consultant will change, and therefore, you know, training people now would seem a really sensible thing to do. It's possible to train smarter. There are software packages out there or apps out there, things like a thing called Ward Watch, which allows you to focus the training opportunity to a specific need of a trainee at any one particular time, and to diary events, so that you can train physically more people in a shorter period of time, in a shorter footprint of opportunity. UK graduates, you know, the situation changed. I've got to say around 2018. You know, the first round of training places used to go to UK graduates, and that was changed. I think that if we are getting into that imbalance again, we need to revisit that, because there's no point in investing in all of our graduates and then not being able to train them. IMGs need to be looked after. They need to be valued, but probably not at the expense of our own graduates. It just would seem a complete contradiction of investment terms. And you know, a lot of IMGs, if we're drawing them from their own countries, we are detracting from their own health service.
Okay, we'll come back to a question about IMGs in a bit, because we probably have some disagreements amongst our entire cohort, as well as a number of other issues that IMGs specifically face. Tom, on the issue of training and about prioritising UK trained regardless of background.
Sure. I mean, the sad thing about workforce planning is that there's always this famine and feast thing. I mean, when I was deputy chair of JDC, I had to argue vociferously to get thousands of junior doctors into posts who are otherwise going to not be employed when the government's new scheme went wrong. And then a couple of years later, we found ourselves desperately short of doctors again. It's just bonkers. We've got this year foundation posts are not available for everybody. And at the same time, specialty training rotas have massive gaps in them. It's just an absolute mess. And workforce plans come and go. And Sajid Javid, of course, in England has just washed his hands of responsibility. So I think the BMA needs to provide leadership, because the government certainly isn't, and get the people in the room who should be doing it and work up a plan with them to provide that leadership and hold the ring. On the UK graduates issue, we need to be self-sufficient as a country, because it's not appropriate really for us to be draining other countries of their doctors, of the brain drain that we're contributing to. But we're not self-sufficient yet, and we do depend on overseas doctors, many of whom obviously are not white, and who, as David said, are not looked after well in the NHS. The high competition specialties, I think, are the ones where this sense of competition arises, like plastic surgery, for example. We know that UK graduates are more likely to remain in the region they train in as well. So it makes some sense to give priority to them, as we already do in many ways. But I think we have to do it in a way that doesn't allow the overseas doctors to be exploited as a consequence in non-training posts.
Thanks, Tom. Vish?
Thanks. I mean, David's mentioned, you know, the kind of state of the NHS in the UK. So we're 50,000 doctors short. The BMA's done a lot of work on that. You know, we've got 20% fewer doctors than the European average. You know, we've got about a third the number of doctors of Germany. So this whole feast and famine thing, actually, it just feels like it just feels like famine the whole way through. I don't remember a time of feast, actually, but actually we've had these little kind of bubbles that are in some ways artificial because there's no workforce plan, as people have mentioned. So I think absolutely it's crucial that we do have that workforce plan. It's really crucial that we have a plan to actually grow our number of doctors, because we clearly don't have enough. And that's what we need to do. And it doesn't, you know, I think it should be a never event, I would say, that actually somebody who's, you know, gone through the UK training system, you know, paid huge amounts of student loan and fees, you know, got onto sort of foundation jobs, etc., that actually they can't find a job in this country to work in. That should be a never event. It shouldn't actually happen. But actually, I don't think it's really a matter of prioritisation, because, come back to the first point, we haven't got enough. So we should be at the moment, we are not self-sufficient, as Tom said. So we should be doing both. We should be increasing medical school places. We should be increasing training places. We should be looking to, you know, appropriately and sustainably look to support people from overseas coming to the UK as well. And actually, we need to be giving, more consultant posts to actually deliver, the care that people need. More GP posts. We actually, if you don't start at the bottom, you're not going to get enough at the top. But we also need to make sure that the senior staff have enough time to actually do the training, to actually do the teaching, because only then will we actually get through this. So that workforce plan is critical. The government, scandalously have not really signed up to that, because that would have been really important, because it would have been law effectively in statute to actually make sure there's a workforce plan. It's been pushed to NHS England. And if people saw the Health Select Committee questioning around some of that last week, a couple of weeks ago, it's very clear they're not going to publish that with the transparency that we need, unfortunately. So the BMA absolutely has a role to make sure that we do hold HEE and NHS England to account on that, because that's the only way we're going to fix this.
Okay. The next most popular question was actually about medical associate professionals, PAs, ACPs, etc. But I'm going to come back to that, because we've talked a little bit about international medical graduates there. So obviously international medical graduates have significant problems after, 5 or 6 years of studying in medical school, 2 years of F1 and F2. International medical graduates still don't really have any rights and can be deported if they don't manage to enroll in training. And for some people who enter GP training, even the GP training is not sufficient to grant them indefinite leave to remain. The ongoing visa issues are a real difficulty for IMGs. How would you suggest that the BMA should approach those? That is Phil first.
I'd get the rules changed. If at first it don't succeed, get the law changed. We managed to do it previously when it came to medical student electives. We talked directly with the border agency from sunny Wales, and they changed the way that student electives both abroad and here were looked at. I appreciate that it was then reversed since then, but it does show an example where direct negotiating with government is, get the law changed. That's what a union's there for.
Tom?
Thank you. I mean, Phil's right. I mean, immigration policy in general in the UK is an immoral mess. I think it's fair to say, and there's a lot that could be said about it in general. Specifically focusing on doctors, though, there isn't a logical approach at the moment in the UK to managing medical shortages. There's a thing called the shortage occupations list that the government maintains, where they allow more lax visa requirements for people in jobs that are in short supply in the UK. And it's really not managed in a logical way. It's very difficult to get jobs taken on and onto that list or removed from it. And that is something that needs to be changed at government level. The BMA as a trade union needs to work with other trade unions as well to get those conversations with the Home Office and with others to be more logical and to try and get some of the heat out of it, the political heat about immigration in general, which is poisoning our ability to actually make change on this. So if we approach it in a very logical way with other trade unions and say, these, because it's not just about the medical workforce, and you've mentioned physicians associates and others, but the whole NHS workforce is relevant, because if you don't have enough nurses, then jobs get pushed onto doctors, etc., and vice versa. So it's a whole workforce thing. Therefore, we need to work with the other trade unions to lobby government on changing the rules and making it a more logical and a more humane approach.
Vish, your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's always linked to the last question as well. So Tom's absolutely right, and as is Phil, we can change those rules. In a different non-BMA role, I've actually managed to get other occupations added to that shortage list. And that is definitely something that we should be looking at doing and having the rules change. But it's linked to that other question is, why would we not want these people in post? We need to have enough places, because we need as many doctors as we absolutely can get. So there shouldn't be a situation where somebody has kind of come into the UK on the promise of, essentially of being able to sort of work in this country and then not be supported after they've been here for 4 years. And it's not, it comes back, we need as many people as we can to actually support the workforce. And I haven't been to a single hospital or a single GP surgery or wherever, anywhere in the UK where they've got enough staff. So why are we even having this conversation? We have enough space for everybody. It should just be, as I said, it should be a never event that people who are looking for jobs in a shortage area cannot get one and not be supported. So that, I think, it's those two strategies together: more funding for training places, and actually get the immigration rules softened, so that actually people aren't having this pressure to stay. Sorry, this pressure that unless they get a job, they won't be able to stay, I should say. Excuse me.
David?
Yeah, I think it's really important, first of all, to recognise the absolutely amazing contribution that IMGs make to the NHS. The NHS is in a near state of collapse anyway, but without IMGs, we wouldn't have any type of health service. So it's really important we recognise that. And, they are some of the most exploited doctors in the country. I was approached by Jenny Vaughan from Doctors Association UK about someone she'd heard about and got hold of his contract. My word, the contract was absolutely abysmal. And often these are people who are employed by private agencies making huge amounts of money. Department of Health, NHS England turn a blind eye to this. We are the ones who can stand up for them and to support them, because they're unable to, or they're afraid to speak out because of the rules that we see, this terrible government that's criticising international graduates who come here. And during COVID, we had indefinite leave to remain extended. The Home Office gave concessions during the pandemic, and we need to lobby for that again. And the BMA is setting up a new international affiliate programme, which council will hear about. New council members, I know, ones continuing, will hear about soon. And that's around supporting them. The BMA, as I said, is best placed to help them on contractual issues. And just one other final thing I'll say, I'll give the GMC a bit of credit here, because they have set up a Welcome to the NHS programme. So they do offer training and support to colleagues coming into the UK to learn about the NHS, about working here. But around the contractual issues, terms and conditions, the BMA is the best place to offer that, and we should be supporting them much more, because they are being exploited dreadfully. Thank you.
Thank you. Now here's the question about medical associate professionals. So there's lots of questions about this from a variety of perspectives. So the kind of easiest way to ask this is, do you support firm definitions for the scope of practice of medical associate professional staff? So ANPs, PAs, ACPs, and so on. And then there's a subsidiary question: should these individuals ever be senior decision makers in a medical context, i.e. on the consultant rota? Hot topic. Tom, can I take you first?
Sure. The rise of MAPS, medical associate professionals, essentially represents a failure of medical workforce planning, and it's unfortunate because it allows two things to align. It allows the employer's desire to fill rotas and to provide service. That need to provide that service aligns with the government's desire to weaken the medical profession, and those two things sadly are now aligned in a way that allows medical associate professionals to be used to further both of those aims, sort of a good aim and a bad aim, as it were. The scope of practice of these non-doctors doing doctor-type roles, I think, does need to be circumscribed. I think many of them they're very good at what they do, but they get pushed by their employer to do more and more, and they get put into increasingly difficult and high risk roles, which are normally filled by doctors who are trained to manage that risk and who have the experience to manage that risk. But these MAPs are put in those positions without that support and without that background, and that's very unfair on them, and it's not fair on the patients either, who often don't necessarily understand who it is that's seeing them. They don't realise, particularly when the MAPs have job titles that include the word consultant, for example, they don't realise they're not seeing a doctor. So that scope of practice needs to be circumscribed. I'm sorry, could you remind me of the second part of the question?
Should MAPs ever be senior decision makers in a medical context?
I think probably not. But senior decision making requires, as I said, that background, the full scope of the medical training, which obviously runs for many, many years and has a very broad start and a very specialized ending. And that just isn't available to many of the MAPs. What tends to happen with these programs is that you get experienced, keen and excited non-doctors to come into them to start with for the pilots, and the pilots look great. And then the pilot ends, they widen it out, and everybody applies, lots of people who don't have that background and that experience. And then the whole program starts to crumble in that regard, because the people are left under-supported and are not experienced enough to make those senior decisions.
Thanks, Tom. I gave you a little bit longer because of the supplementary question, so I'm going to do the same for everybody else. Vish, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks. So the question, I think, is a really good one, because I think it's the right question. So I was expecting it to be, do you support maps, full stop? And actually, I think that's a bit more complicated. I think the question that is being asked is the correct one, because I disagree ever so slightly with what Tom said at the very start. I think there is a role for maps, because certainly I think at every grade, the amount of work that you do as a doctor that you don't really need to do is so big, actually, and that just contributes to your kind of stress, your kind of ability to do your actual job and various things. So I think there is a role for a kind of medical assistant type role. But the question's spot on, because actually it's the issues around the scope of practice. What is actually appropriate for this group of staff to do? And that's where I think it's not right at the moment. So they certainly, they should never be seen as a substitute doctor at any grade, I would say. So they should not be seen as a substitute junior doctor. They should not be on, alongside registrar rotas making kind of, important decisions. I think that's not the right, that was never what the role was designed to be. And absolutely, as chair of consultants, when we first got wind of this concept of consultant maps, we were absolutely anti this, because that's not appropriate. That is, in order to be a consultant, you've gone through very extensive medical training. You have to know things beyond very limited scope. And actually, when people do map training, they may be very good at a certain area, but actually they don't have that breadth of knowledge. They don't know when they're kind of out of their depth, or when things actually need to take a different route. And so we were very strongly opposed, both in terms of the name, consultant map, but also that role as a senior decision maker. I think that has to be the role of a consultant or a senior specialist doctor. But actually the maps, I think, do have a place, but it is more limited in terms of actually supporting the medical workforce rather than being replacement, in my view.
Thanks, Vish. David, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think maps, is a catch-all definition, isn't it, for many colleagues? And what I absolutely agree that these should not be substitutes for doctors in any form whatsoever. I know that pay of physicians associates is quite a hot topic, and it's a really big issue about how much they get paid compared to junior colleagues. Many listening in on this call. And if we get pay restoration, then that will become less of an issue, along with the caveats we talked about earlier. But I think there does need to be a firm definition around the scope of practice. They're not substitutes for doctors. They haven't got the wide range of training, the broad knowledge around seeing, diagnosing, treating patients. I think doctors do need support in things around phlebotomy, or doing tasks that free up a doctor to do the work that they're trained to do, that they are highly qualified to do. And this all comes back to the scenario that we've got with a huge lack of workforce, gross failure by government to provide adequate doctors and all other professionals, nurses, midwives as well. And that's why this conversation is happening. And because the Consultants Committee had a really good debate the other week, actually, around doctors' assistants and how they could help support doctors in the workplace, all types of doctors in primary and secondary care, to free them up, to allow them to do the work that they're trained to do, that they enjoy doing, and seeing, diagnosing and treating patients. So there is a role for them, but yes, we need to limit the scope of that and be quite firm in how we feel about that in order to support doctors and support our members. Thanks.
Thanks. Phil?
If you want to be a doctor, go to medical school. We are trained as critical thinkers to evaluate the evidence that's in front of us, so that when the policy or protocol that we're following doesn't work, we've got the deep-based knowledge and skills to deal with that. So no, these don't have a place as senior decision makers. The other thing that happens is that doctors, when they qualify, are working to a particular standard. You're reasonably sure that a doctor at any particular level will be able to do particular things. And the problem with maps is that it's very individualized. You may get someone who's particularly good at something and can do it better than perhaps a doctor can. And certainly, there are some practice nurses in general practice who make some very good decisions and work very similar level to a GP sometimes, but very individual. This is part of the substitution agenda. The BMA should have done more to try and fight this. It is just criminal that there is no workforce plan. We've known about this for 20 years, and it's all about trying to control us, trying to dumb down medicine, and we have to stand firm against that. There's an underlying agenda here, and that's to make us part of agenda for change. What doctors have, we have expertise. We are experts, and what we do brings to the table, and what consultants bring to the table, is that ability to improvise in novel situations. Now, a map is never going to get to that place, and we should defend it at all costs.
Okay, lots of variation. Then the next question is about transparency in the BMA. So would you support regular publishing of meeting minutes, voting records, and establish processes to hold elected members more accountable, so recall mechanisms and similar? What are your views on transparency in the BMA? We're going to take Vish first.
Okay, so there are a few bits to that one, so I hope I remember them all. So absolutely fully support transparency within the BMA. I think one of the things that we are not very good at is letting our members know what we're doing. There's no good ways of actually members knowing what their appointed representatives are actually saying or doing, and I think we need to make that better. And that needs to be clear, I think, at all levels, actually, not just at council. But I think there are some issues around what transparency looks like. So I know you put forward in your suggestions that this is automatic publishing of minutes, for example, automatic records of how people have voted, etc. I think that might need a little bit of thought, a little bit of work as to whether that's definitely the right model. There are other models, because one thing that I'd be slightly anxious about is that there are things that do need to remain confidential. So things like our strategy around industrial action, for example, we don't want that published automatically. We don't want other things that, potentially, because the BMA is a big board, for example, so if you talk about transparency of the board, you don't want financially sensitive information out in the public domain automatically. So I think there's a balance about sort of saying, do you just publish everything automatically, in which case you might actually not be able to have some discussions as freely in council, which I think is a slight concern, and actually, or you might have to have things in camera more frequently. So I think there's a balance, but I think I would certainly be supportive of actually publishing reports, and I know you do that, Emma, on a regular basis for the Broad Left, and they're really good, and I think that sort of thing is absolutely right. I think on the minutes thing, automatically, we'll have to have a little bit of a think about it. I think a little working group about how we improve transparency would be really good. And similarly on the automatic voting bit, again, broadly supportive of that. But again, the caveat is that, well, first of all, we need to improve our systems about recording votes because they're incredibly tedious, but I'm sure we can do that quite easily. But actually, the slight challenge about automatic publishing of votes is it doesn't always say why you voted for something or in a particular way, and it sometimes might not be that you don't agree with a particular motion, for example, in terms of sentiment, but it might be around sort of technicalities or unintended consequences. So I think, again, with caveats, I think it's something that is potentially doable, but again, support the sort of principle of that. And then finally, around recall arrangements. So council's unusual in some ways. So for example, on consultants committee, there is kind of provisions for votes of no confidence in the chair of the committee, for example, in the standing orders. But for council, the articles and bylaws and the standing orders are silent on that. But having said that, at any time, a motion could be brought to council supported by 10 members for a vote of no confidence in the chair. So that mechanism does exist, but it doesn't automatically mean that they would need to leave, although in reality, they would have to sort of resign in that scenario. So again, that could be tightened, and I wouldn't necessarily have any objections to that. It's already in place for consultants, which I chair.
Okay, David.
Yeah, so I am also very keen on seeing us improve on the position where we are. I'm really very keen on transparency. On votes, we have a system where we can have recorded votes or roll call. The roll call does, it will take a long time with 70 people, but recorded votes we can now do with the electronic system we've got, and that could be easily done quickly and put into the minutes. So there is a way of doing this in a sort of a more appropriate way that doesn't take up half an hour for every vote. I think there's an issue around the board. The board is accountable to council. I think there needs to be more openness there about what the board is discussing, about the risks that the board sees for the BMA in the time ahead of us. We have elected members of council elected onto the board, but we used to have people reporting back to council from the board, which seemed to sort of slip away. So I think that is something we need to bring back, but also bolster it up, so that people have more ability to see what's happening at the board and what's being discussed. I think around the issue of publishing minutes, yes, I'm keen on that. I do think, Vish makes a good point really around being careful we don't publish our strategy on industrial action or what we want to push for DDRB that might give the other side an advantage. And I don't think the chair can sort of say make it so. So I mean, council needs to debate and discuss this and decide how to take it forward, and taking all these other issues into play. On recall, yeah, I think the chair of council was removed some years ago due to a particular incident, something that was said, but it does need updating. The rules need updating to ensure that there's a proper system in place, so a chair can be removed in a democratic way and not just stay on, even though if there is a vote of no confidence. So that is something that needs sorting. But my summary is, yes, I'm open to transparency. I want to talk to council members more about this, and the implications of it are there, but I don't think we need to be too frightened of it. And I think members out there want to hear more. And I talked a little earlier about live tweeting from council. The Royal College, one of the Royal Colleges does this, and it works really well. And that opens up what you're talking about. I've done a little bit myself from council, and it does get good feedback. So yeah, there's more we could do there on a comms perspective as well around being open and transparent. Thanks.
Phil?
I've never quite understood why we're so secretive as an organisation, and why we're not more open and transparent. The vast majority of our business and our committee work isn't confidential, and therefore I think there should be a presumption that agendas and minutes should be available to members. It's possible to use IT to assist with voting and for vote recording and for making votes cast available. There will always be things that as a council we agree should be kept confidential. As David correctly points out, actually where the balance lies is for council to decide, and whoever's chair will have to have an early debate and discussion on that. In terms of recall, the chair shouldn't be in a position where you need to recall. If we're in that position, we haven't done our communication with council members well enough. So that would be the important thing for me. If you've got a stage where your council is starting to lose confidence in you, then we haven't been doing the communication work. We haven't been involving people, and we haven't brought people with us.
Tom?
Thanks. I also support the presumption of publication, as I say, with the caveat that those who don't have our interests at heart will be able to read them as well. So strategically sensitive issues. We also sometimes discuss individual doctors' cases as well at council. That obviously needs to be redacted, but an explanation needs to be given. This section is missing because it discusses an individual or whatever. Voting records, as I said earlier, we don't often vote because it's normally consensus led, but when we do, I agree it ought to be published. For example, I know how I voted in 2012 on continuing industrial action, but I've been told formally that I can't tell you today how anybody else voted in that meeting because it's confidential, which is very odd because individual members can go and look at those minutes, but you can't tell everybody what you read. It's very strange. One thing I would say is that people might want to be able to, members of council that is, might want to be able to addend an explanation of their votes, because the binary yes, no that you've got on the paper doesn't always explain, as others have said, the long discussions and the multiple factors that you take into account when you come to your conclusion. And it might be quite a close thing in your mind, but on paper it's just yes or no. I've got no problem with recall mechanisms. We referenced earlier the BMA's performance in 2007 and the MTAS debacle. In the middle of that, as David alluded to, Jim Johnson, the chair, inexplicably wrote a joint letter to the papers with somebody from the Royal Colleges, basically seriously undermining JDC's position that I and others were trying to advocate publicly. And he was gone within a week because that was just completely inappropriate. These things are for junior doctors to deal with. The chair of council should not be interfering, and likewise consultants and GPs and so on. This is all in council's power to change, so it's something to put on the agenda early.
Thank you. We're basically out of time for questions, but we've had loads. So I would really encourage you to go and have a look at the Reddit threads, the Reddit live chat, and the Twitter hashtag BMA chair, and answer them after this meeting. We're now going to give you each a minute and a half to do a very quick sum up about what kind of any final messages you'd like to give to members or to voters who are on council. And then I'll just close the meeting quite quickly at the end. Okay, so David, can you sum up first?
Yeah, thanks, Emma, and thanks everyone for listening in, and I hope you found it helpful. It's been a fascinating few hours. I think really I just want to sum up and say that if I'm elected, I will be an inclusive leader. I want to work with you as council members and all parts of the BMA. I want to turn us into a mass membership organisation and put trade union issues at the front first and foremost. And I should add that I do feel that the professional parts of the BMA are important as well. Our medical ethics and board of science, it's doing really important work for the association. But our trade union aspects we really need to bolster up and look at all the issues we've talked about: pay, pensions, taxation, pension taxation, workforce workload, and all the external organisations that are working against us, so that we can be the doctors we want to be, to look after our patients in a safe, quality and effective way. And we can do that, and I'm really excited about the opportunity to work with you and others to take the BMA into a new place, and I hope you would support me. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Phil?
Oh, I thought I might get last place then. All right. But my aim is to help you succeed, to feel involved and that you belong to the BMA, all right, and with the BMA as we transition into a modern trade union. I mean, as you know, will fight for what's right and to make that difference. And really, that's my sole motivation. I've changed culture, I've changed behaviours, and we can change the BMA. I'm here to serve you as your chair. How you vote, how you rank us will determine the future of your BMA, our profession, and the NHS. Obviously, I hope you vote for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Tom?
Thank you. As I've said several times this afternoon, the medical profession is in a bad state, and the social contract between us and society has been broken. We're over-regulated and underpaid and exhausted, and we need change, because at the moment, the things that the hospitals and the GMC and others are doing just aren't achieving the results that we need as a profession. You need somebody who can take the BMA in a new direction, someone who's got experience and who understands what doctors are going through at the moment, and who can unite the profession around a vision of the future. This is an election, Hustings, and one thing I would say is that this is an election with transferable votes. Some of you will be putting me first on your ballot paper, for which thank you. But I know some of you may already have promised your first vote to someone else, somebody you know from your region, for example. If you have put someone else down as your first choice, but you like what I've said today, I'd ask you to please give me your second vote. As I said at the start, I have a vision. I have a vision where doctors and students are happy in their work and training, where they're well supported, well paid, able to do the right thing for their patients and lead a balanced life that leaves them fulfilled, with the broken contract with society restored. We need change, and we can get there if we work together, but we'll need a strong, inclusive leader to do that, and I can be that leader for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Finally, Vish.
Thanks, Emma. So, as I said in my speech at the start, I joined the BMA because I was angry. I joined the BMA to help members, and nothing has changed, and nothing will change, as I continue my BMA journey. I really want us to focus on and prioritise members' interests. So as David said, yes, the BMA is a professional association and we do great work in that regard, and I'm not downplaying that, but we need to focus on delivering for members, and that's what I hope to bring. I have the experience, I've been elected by consultants to lead them. I've been elected by the whole branch of practice to actually deliver on pensions. I have that track record. I have arguably done more and achieved more on pay and pension than anyone else in the BMA over the course of the last particularly 5 or 6 years. I really feel strongly that we need to sort of change how the BMA works, make it more transparent, engage better with members, and that's something we would aim to do. And I think my leadership style is very inclusive. That is, as I mentioned before, reflected in feedback from both my committee and from the BMA staff. And I think that is really important in terms of actually ensuring that the BMA works as a single entity, actually delivering. And I think we worry about conflicts or differences between the committees. Actually, everybody that's actually within the BMA is united about actually achieving for members, and it's just about harnessing that and actually embracing our differences, and I think I can do that. So I really hope you kind of like what you've heard today, and I'm happy always to take any questions or thoughts from you. I am on Twitter. I don't use it as much as I should, but I am on Twitter, so people can feel free to message me as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So I suppose what's left for me to say is that brings us to the end of the hustings. It's really been brilliant seeing so many of you engage with the BMA leadership, often for the first time. And there were so many good questions that we haven't had time to put to these candidates. As you've heard, I've encouraged them to go and seek those out. And where we're struggling, we might try and collate some of those and send them in writing and see if we can get written answers that we can put out, because there was so much that we didn't get to. Hopefully we'll be able to kind of bring together all of those ideas before the election, which happens at the very end of ARM at the end of June. But I think it's also worth kind of highlighting the change that's just happened. The change from kind of private proceedings where hustings are only heard by BMA council members and lots of deals are done quietly, to very public member engagement. And I hope that that's the first of many shifts that the Broad Left and DoctorsVote will enable in the BMA. I said at the beginning, all of the DoctorsVote and Broad Left council members, all 26 of us, are intending to publish who we are voting for and why, following the BMA hustings and ARM. So it's really obvious that your union is changing in front of your eyes. So it's also time to do your bit. Get involved. If you're not a member and you've watched this, join. If you want to be active on pay or maps or IMG issues, join and become a rep. Join the activist group that Joe mentioned in the middle. If you're interested in the stuff that Broad Left and DoctorsVote are doing, get in contact with us, email us. We're actively looking for pay organisers who can do local work at the moment. When we organise together, we win. And I hope that whoever wins this council or chair of council election, we win lots in the next 3 or 4 years. Thank you, everybody.